Does your fair or festival have a musical element, a concert? Stay with us. Today, we're going to talk about the latest innovations in soundstage and lighting and what you need to do to put on a good musical event.
Welcome to Festival Soup, the podcast for festival, fair, and rodeo professionals. Join your host, Mike Baxter, a certified festival and event executive, as he brings you interviews from industry leaders, expert advice, and the latest updates from the world of fun-filled events. Whether you're working on a startup or managing an established, long-running event, Festival Soup has the ingredients for success.
Welcome to Festival Soup. Today, we're going to be talking about everything that goes into putting together the stage, sound, lighting, and more for a live concert in your fair or festival. My guest today is Scott Powers with Bayou City Sound. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about Bayou City Sound.
Bayou City is a local sound and lighting company based out of Houston. We do naturally live sound. We can do lighting. We've done video on occasion. And we also do AV install and integration.
Yeah. Well, let's kind of talk the basics on this. How do you go into an event and determine what's going to be the right size stage, the right sound system, everything you need to put together one of these events?
Mike, it starts with something we call pre-production. That's where we meet with the festival board and the staff, and we start to get some ideas, get some intel on what type of event this is, what kind of clientele they expect to have attending. And then we start getting into what kind of acts they're going to have, where their stage is going to be, and any other amenities around that stage that helps us to start designing the system to bring in.
Yeah, because we've worked together for years. So,
yes,
I know how we worked here in Tomball and other locations around the state.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk first about some of the considerations that go into determining, like, whether you're going to set your stage up on pavement or in the grass,
mm-hmm.
or has it got a slant to it? How big is the area? Things like that you have to think about.
Well, those are all considerations. Flat paved surfaces are usually best, especially for your stage, keeping it level, getting access to the stage. We realize in some events they have to be either on a packed surface or occasionally they might be in a grass. What we look for in that is, what's maybe the height of that, as far as there might be drainage, weather can affect those surfaces. And again, you're looking at accessibility. Does it require something like a gator to get something across there, or can we actually bring in an equipment truck?
Yeah.
And same thing for the bands as far as accessing, bringing in buses, trailers, and getting their backline gear in on stage.
Yeah, that's been a problem in several things that, we've worked on before, is that you can't get the truck with all the equipment in. And it's all right when it's a dry, environment. But if you've had a little rain the night before,
mm-hmm.
you're dealing with mud and things like that. And in a lot of cases, people don't even have any kind of access to the stage because it wasn't in their thought process when they were planning this event.
You're exactly right. Or plan B, for instance, if you know you've gotten a little bit of rain or you have a surface that's a little bit compromised, sometimes just a couple of sheets of plywood can work wonders as far as getting things into the stage.
Because we've used sand and we've used kitty litter. I know we've done that before too.
Yes.
In some of the events that we've worked with.
Mm-hmm.
Like coming in that morning here in Tomball and had 6 inches of water in the grass in front of the stage. And that's where your tent was set up, with the power lines run across it and things like that. So, yeah.
Well, and you mentioned the terrain as far as level or angled. Use the example of the 4th of July event that's held out in the middle of 249. Because of the topography there and the rake that's in the road, because it's on a curve, we learned something the hard way. We had typically set up the stage, which can be leveled, and we had our gear in the downward end of the slope. Well,
right.
We found out we didn't realize how badly that was going to flood during a heavy rain because it happened to be a choke point for water. And we were standing ankle deep in water, which was a little bit alarming, but we got through it.
Yeah. And other things to consider too is the surrounding area. Maybe there's a neighborhood nearby.
Exactly
and
right.
You've got to worry about, sound levels. So can you talk a little to that?
Typically, what you're doing in getting that information is you're going to design a system that's right for the event. What you want in the system is it's going to be the right size and the right power to cover what is the designated listening area, but you want to keep it maintained within that area. We don't want that spilling out into other areas such as vendor areas, children's areas, and as you mentioned, residential areas where that can be just a complete disruption to their day. So you want to keep levels within a manageable thing, and doing that by system designs. Systems become a little more steerable, and there's line array models that we can bring in, and sound pressure models that we can bring in, so we can actually design the system to stay focused within that area and keep it out of the areas we don't want it in.
And sometimes you've got to deal with sound ordinances too. Like
Yes.
the music needs to cut off at a certain time because of city
Exactly
ordinance
right.
or whatever it happens to be. So another consideration.
Another consideration is it may require a sound permit. The city of Houston, if you're going to hold an event outside, you've got to have a permit.
So are there new innovations in soundstage and lighting that we can talk about?
Yes, there are.
Well, let's do it.
Which one would you like to hear first?
You go first. It's your thing.
Well, let's talk about staging. In the past, we've seen vast inclinations of a stage. We've seen flatbed trucks. We've seen plywood built structures. Then they came up with a Bill Jacks system, which was modular. It's 4x4 decking with adjustable legs. Those were great, but they are very work intensive, and they're very, very physical labor intensive jobs, and they're dangerous for fingers and hands. Now they've come up with risers that are foldable, rolling in place, but lately we've seen, for instance, the SSL stage, which is hydraulic. It's a stage that tows behind a vehicle. It looks like a small truck trailer, and it folds out into a stage with a complete roof. And those stages are ranged, I think, at 24 by 20 foot, which is a very good size stage for smaller festivals. And some are 32 foot longer, 32 feet and larger.
Yeah. And they're so simple to go up.
Yes, they are.
That's a good thing.
They can go up within 45 minutes.
Yeah. Because we were talking earlier about how, in our case, you would bring in the trailer at night and have everything ready to go. And then the next morning, you just roll in and set up the sound and the lights, and we took off.
And the unique thing about that was, if we need to, we could actually bring it in that morning and still be ready to go.
Yeah. So what about any kind of innovations in lighting?
Lighting, we're seeing more innovation in moving light. It seems that entertainment now is not so much about sound. It's more about lighting and visual. We're seeing lighting and video. Moving lights have made a big leap. They're getting smaller. They're more powerful. Consoles are getting smaller and thankfully a little more affordable. Video walls now are capable of being arrayed outdoors and with extremely high definition. It's like watching a 4K TV, even in 16 by 9 or larger panels.
And then what about sound? I know when I was a kid, a long time ago, I went to see the Beatles, and they had, these speakers, Atlanta Stadium. It's awesome. But these people had giant speakers and stacks of speakers and everything. And that's not the case anymore.
No, it's not. Speaker technology has made a big leap in the 80s, and it's continued to evolve. Systems we employ now are not even using paper cones. They're now made of Kevlar. It's a much more durable material. The technology within the boxes and the technology within processing and amplifiers have made systems now to where I mentioned before that they are steerable. You can limit sound within certain areas. One of the big innovations that they've done now is through subwoofers. Subwoofers are not nearly as controllable as mid-high cabinets, just because of the length of the sound wave. What they've come up with now is cardioid subs, where they can place the speaker behind one another, and through phasing and through time alignment, they can create something that cancels sub, so it only goes forward and not backward. There's another configuration that we have is called a front-back-front, where we're stacking 3 speakers. The middle one is facing backward. In effect, what that does is if you are out in front of that subwoofer, you're getting all the subwoofer energy. As you walk to the side of it, it cancels. If you go behind it, it's almost completely gone. And what the advantage of that is that it keeps the sub off the stage. It doesn't affect the musicians as much. Their monitor levels can be a lot better managed, but also it's better for them performing. Sound is wood's an instrument. Your stage is wood, so some of those frequencies can get accented. So those are some of the innovations that are out there now and available.
Talking about performers for a minute here, you've worked with a lot of big bands,
Sure.
a lot of smaller bands. And so what are the expectations of bands that folks that are putting on a festival or a fair could expect and that you have to deal with?
For touring acts, I think they're looking for consistency. And again, this all goes into pre-production. If they're traveling self-contained, they're used to consistency. The reason they're self-contained is so they can be consistent night after night, day after day, event after event. If they're coming into a situation there, their expectations of us, or what we think their expectations should be, that we're there to assist them. We've worked things out in pre-production so that the timeline is set. Things are going to be in place. The gear that we've already discussed with them is there. It's ready to go. It's in good working order. And that we're going to perform and work closely with them in setting up their stage and giving them what they need and want to put on their show. Okay. If it's a local performer, the same thing in pre-production. We start asking questions if they've played on a stage of that size, what other events have they played, what are they used to, and you start working out those things. What I think they expect from us is, again, consistency, because we're acting then as their engineer to put across their show. So working closely with them to figure out, what is this band about? What is your sound like? What are your expectations? Getting them comfortable on stage and working with them closely to put on their show. And even to the point of, if you have something we can listen to, do you have a CD or something, so that we can get something in our heads as far as an idea of how this band comes across or how it's mixed. Mm-hmm. Engineers like to mix their own way sometimes, but if that's not the essence of the band, then we're trying to mix the band the way they want to be mixed, or how they're heard, or maybe how their fans are used to hearing them.
Yeah. And some of these bands even come in with a full layout mm-hmm. of how they want the stage set. And
Absolutely.
They'll give you a map, basically. X marks the spot for where they want their microphones and their speakers and everything else as well. So it's just something that a festival promoter, a concert promoter, should be expecting.
Yes, and it's a two-way street also. We're working currently in production with Fort Bend County Fair. We put together the lighting plot and the input list and the DMX addresses for the lighting to offer that to traveling engineers that are coming in mm-hmm. so that they can have a full understanding of what's there, and if they just need to plug in and play, or if they need to bring in their own systems to augment that.
Yeah. And then we talked the little things like a drum riser mm-hmm. and water on the stage, that there are things that you might overlook. What are some of the things that maybe a first-time festival concert person might miss if they're not careful?
Just details. What we've run across in the past is sometimes they've hired an act, maybe a touring act, mm-hmm. and they've not paid attention completely to a contract writer. They might have, or they may not have shared that information with us. And we've run into a situation of the act is contracted with the festival. The festival is then contracted with us to bring in a sound system. Mm-hmm. What is required on the contract writer for the act may not be necessarily what we brought. And then that can create an uncomfortable situation or something that has to be worked out. We try to work that out in pre-production. What we offer is show us a contract writer. Let us take this off your hands if you want that, and we can contact the act. We can work all of this out and then come back to you with what's been agreed to, and I've seen it cost people money. That's just one example, and this may not be a big thing, but sometimes in the contract writer, especially in touring acts, they may require what they call stagehands for helping them load and unload. Mm-hmm. And I've been involved in many a situation where we're set up, the band comes in and they say, where are the stagehands? And we're like, we're trying to find them. In those cases, we try to help out as much as we can, but that just doesn't get the day off to a good start sometimes. Yeah. And it's even worse when they're not there for a loadout. Mm-hmm. And what they're saying by stagehands, they don't have to be music people. They just need to be capable of lifting or pushing, and that's usually specified in the contract. And key is that they can communicate and that they be sober. Yeah. And that's a key point. Yeah. People are paying us to work, not to drink.
That's right.
So
let's take a break real quick for a word from our sponsor.
Ready to elevate your event to the next level? Partner with Certified Festival and Events Executive Mike Baxter and Texas Festival and Tourism Consulting to transform your festival or fair into an unforgettable experience. With a track record of success at renowned events like the Midland County Fair, the Texas Blueberry Festival, the McAllen Holiday Parade, the Lubbock Arts Festival, the Texas Crab Festival, and the Great Texas Mosquito Festival, Mike brings unparalleled expertise to your event planning and execution. From event evaluation and development to strategic marketing, public relations, and award-winning photography, Mike is your go-to consultant for making your event shine. Don't miss out on the opportunity to work with one of the best in the business. Mike Baxter is former chairman and longtime member of the Texas Festivals and Events Association and a member of the Texas Association of Fairs and Events. Call or text Mike Baxter today at 281-222-4775 or email mike@txfestconsultant.com. Let's make your next event a standout success.
Welcome back. We're talking with Scott Powers here of Bayou City Sound in Houston. Let's talk about what goes into determining the cost of a sound package for a concert or a festival.
One of my favorite analogies, there was a cartoon in one of the trade magazines years ago, and it said, this is what the venue provided, and it had a system set up. Then the next one, it said, this is what the sound engineer wanted, and it had this massive system. Mm-hmm. Then it had another system where the speakers were kind of piled up like a pyramid, and said, this is what the band thought was cool. Then the next picture was two speakers on its stick, and it said, this is what the venue needed. It was a point that some people come in, and even to the point where we've dealt with acts that are saying, I've got to have all of this, and we've had to explain to them, you're playing this is a private party, and you're playing in a 50 by 40 tent. Well, that's one of the things that's sometimes hard to quote. We get a lot of people that say, I'm going to have a festival, give me a number. The questions that need to be maybe thought about, or the factors that need to go into it is, well, how many days is your festival? When are setup times? When are end times? How many bands are you going to have? Are they going to require separate sound checks? Maybe if you've got a headliner, for instance, that's going to have to come in early in the morning and do their sound check, and then run the rest of your acts. Another thing that comes into it is what kind of gear. What system are we going to need to cover this event, cover it effectively? Will we require separate consoles for the house position and separate consoles for the monitor position, which may turn into a different cost factor because it's more equipment and more engineers? A ground stack system versus maybe a line array system. Line arrays are typically flown with subs that are brought in, that are put in on the ground to augment them bin high cabinets. Ground stack systems can go in easier because sometimes they're preset and need you roll into place. That's a labor thing that maybe saves you some cost, but it may not cover the venue properly. If it requires a line array system, you're talking about motors and a few other things. So those are some of the things that can go into the cost. The other thing is it going to be running into the nighttime? Are we going to require a lighting package, and maybe how big the lighting package or how complex it may need to be to cover the artist or the artist rider.
Mm-hmm. Another thing to consider too is it an outdoor festival, an indoor festival?
Absolutely.
Is it going to be under big tents? So
yes,
like an Oktoberfest under the giant tent, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
those are all things to consider.
Yeah, and as we've talked earlier, no festival runs without power.
Absolutely.
Let's talk power.
Power is one of the things that's it's most important, and it's not only needed to run your event, but it needs to be set up safely. Power being one of the most important things. You want dedicated power for your stage. You don't want to be tied. You don't want to have systems that are tied in with vendors, because that can affect both the vendors and
Mm-hmm.
even more so the sound and the sound equipment. When you start looking at power, you start looking at, okay, where are your cable runs? Where can we run this cable safely? How far is the stage from the power source? That's a key factor, because after so many feet, you start getting voltage drop, and that's dangerous for equipment, and it's underpowered systems are just not going to work properly. The other thing is you may need to think about where this cable path is. Is it safe? Do we have to bring in barricades and cable ramps? If it's a generator system, typically what we do is spec a generator that's slightly more than what we would need to actually run the event. The reason being is you want to make sure that you're not running that generator at full capacity, so it has a little in reserve. That's helps to ensure that the event will continue, that the generator is going to run like it should. The other thing is that generator can then, having an extra capacity, maybe can be used for something in case there's a hiccup or something that comes in, any kind of an emergency. Yes, we might be able to tie in power, shift some things around. The other thing that's critical is any power system should be properly grounded. If you're indoors, usually the grounding is already in place. But if you're going to be running a show with a generator, a lot of generator companies typically just don't send out grounding equipment. We carry grounding rods and wire that we can actually tie in to properly ground that system. And that is strictly a must for safety. Mm-hmm. And it's an ungrounded system can wreak havoc as far as finding little buzzes and hum in your sound system.
Yeah. Well, name dropping. The Great Texas Mosquito Festival in Clute, mm-hmm. and the Texas Crab Festival down in Crystal Beach that I've worked with, mm-hmm. They made the choice to really invest in enough power to run a major concert. And it's built into the ground, mm-hmm. and all you do is drive up and plug in. Perfect. And it's awesome, versus having to deal with a generator and making sure it's the right generator, because that's one thing years ago we had problems with, you and I, was that the generators we had been using, maybe they weren't strong enough or whatever we needed for the needs, but there was always that spike that we would get in power that mm-hmm. would affect the sound and the equipment and things like that. And so when we got to using that specific generator that was made for the application, no problems.
You brought up a good point, Mike. Not all generators are the same, and there is something called an entertainment grade generator, or a generator that's capable of providing entertainment level sound. And those generators typically, as you said, are equipped with units to keep the voltage at a constant level so that it doesn't spike up or down. And one of the things is some of them run much more quiet. Mm-hmm. Another big thing that we didn't maybe touch on is when you have a generator system that's going to run your festival, you want to put it in a place where it's not going to affect the patrons by noise and exhaust, and same thing with the stage and the band. I don't know of any band that likes to try to perform and sing when they're inhaling diesel exhaust. So that's another key thing to keep in mind.
So with a company like yours and any other soundstage lighting company, mm-hmm. how far out in advance should a festival or fair reach out to you as a contractor, as a vendor, in order to get your services to start with, but to make sure there's plenty of time for the planning that's necessary to put on an event?
The sooner the better. And I think it's an advantage to get your sound company locked in or considered sooner than later for a number of things. You can have those pre-production talks and get those things in place. And once you've decided on a company, they have that much more time to address things with the acts, with the festival, come up with a great plan. And there's much more time in between then for any little detail or change that may come up. Maybe you have an act that has to cancel. Maybe there's an act that has to switch their performance time before something. So the more you've got out of the way in front, the less time you're going to be pulling your hair out later.
Because as important as music is to a festival or a fair, you want to make sure you've gotten it right. And this is not the sort of thing you want to do on your own. You want to bring in professionals if you want to put on a professional show. And so, that's why companies like yours are so important to a fair, a festival, or rodeo.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I can't think of anything else, Mike, other than we look forward to working together with anybody out there that wants to hire us.
That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming, Scott. So that's it for this week, guys. So be watching for future episodes of Festival Soup, and we will talk soon.
That's all for this episode of Festival Soup. We hope you enjoyed our tasty serving of festival insights and advice. If you liked what you heard, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us continue to bring you the best content in the industry. For more tips, trends, and updates, visit our website at www.festivalsoup.com. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, great ingredients make for a tasty festival soup. See you next week.